be an aircraft mechanic. From Halton, I went to RAF station at Lynham, then on to RAF station Ossington at Nottinghamshire, and then from Nottinghamshire we moved up to Fraserburgh. My first recollections of that was that it was a very, very sudden move. I was just told to get our kit and our bags and everything packed very quickly, and a special train was waiting, and it took our unit, or most of our unit, to Fraserburgh. Having said that, we was only a small part that came to Kilnborg, about approximately 85 people, and yet out of that 85 people there was almost 60 Londoners, and the result was when we came to Fraserburgh we arrived here around 3 o'clock in the morning, and that was in the early part of May 1943, and we thought obviously at that time it was a very, very cold, wind-swept place. And I'm afraid that recollection still stays. And then we was taken out to Kilnborg Aerodrome by special train again, and having said that, that was our first recollections, and a comment of most of the people was, as they passed first one cemetery and then the other cemetery, was the fact that they would need them in this cold climate. Well, that same particular day, myself and two friends walked into Fraserburgh sometime during the afternoon, possibly around 3:30 I would have said, and there was Beaufighters or Beauforts accompanied by Spitfires, and as they crossed over what is known as the Bath's house, one of the Spitfires touched one of the Beaufighters, and the result was he finished up in the water possibly a quarter of a mile offshore. This particular pilot was rescued by the pilot boat from Fraserburgh Harbour, and I believe it was a Mr. William Smith, who's long since dead now, who was the man who rescued him. Having said that, our first impression of Fraserburgh, if you wish, was that, well, we weren't used to being so near the coast, right on the coast, and the result was between wind and everything, as I'm saying, our impressions still stayed that it was a very, very bleak spot. During that particular winter of 1943, the Gowan Hill Road had at least 10 feet of snow on it, I believe. It was certainly blocked for a considerable time, and we just realised how bad the climate was at that time. We once went out on a search for a missing aircraft, and we went right up over Windy Hill, hanging onto the side of fire tenders trying to find a smith. But we all went to a cookhouse and we got porridge for breakfast, and having said this, the porridge had plenty of salt in. Well, being a Londoner and so many other Londoners, the result was that nobody touched their porridge because everybody believed in putting sugar or syrup into their porridge. So when the orderly officer come round and said any complaints, everybody just said the porridge wasn't fit to eat. So that was the finish of porridge with salt in. Around the month of October, I think it was, when the RAF regiment arrived to guard the aerodrome, and it could have been somewhere around about that time as well that one of our aircraft landed on the beach, having supposedly run out of petrol. But in actual fact he'd forgotten to switch on his auxiliary tanks, but we had a job to get that taken away and won the Queen Mary's and that there. There was one particular dinner time, there was a tremendous southerly storm got up from nowhere, and as far as I recollect it, overturned 2 of our aircraft and destroyed them. And that. This was a thing which again we weren't used to, such a quick change in the weather conditions, a dramatic changes. During 1944 they put all dummy aircraft, they were built on the east side of the aerodrome alongside the beaches, and that. These were Boston aircraft and that. And there was one particular night when I was laying out the flare path, a twin-engine German aeroplane approached, and he was actually given a green light to land. But I didn't realise that he was a German at the time, and immediately he'd swooped over the airfield, no doubt taking photos. The lights and everything was all put out. We had one serious accident during the time I was there, and that was when 2 aircraft collided, and unfortunately there was 2 people killed, one in each aircraft I think it was. There was a Sergeant Milne, a pupil, who was training to be a pilot, and there was also an Australian pilot officer who was an instructor. The Sergeant Milne is now buried in Cairnbog Cemetery. And that. I can't just think of anything. Oh, this particular night that we did go out looking for an aircraft, it was a terrible night of snow and everything, and that was the one time that I ever heard or ever got a rum ration, and we were given a rum ration when we landed back at the aerodrome somewhere around about 6 o'clock in the morning. And that. Also, we did have one disaster when we had a physical training instructor drowned at Faloth. He was actually rescuing ATC cadets, and he rescued 4 or 5 before he was swept out to sea. And although we put aircraft up to look for him, he was never seen again. There was another particular instance when we had 3 Hamden aircraft landed, and they landed from a northwest to a southeast, and thereby all overshooting the aerodrome and landing in the ditch next to the farm. No sooner had we got these cleared, and the Flying Fortress did the exact same thing. But the Flying Fortress being an American plane, spares were flown up from Preston, where apparently it was based, and new engines and everything were fitted, and the aircraft was actually flown away in about 10 days. Having said this, the aircraft was landing from west to east when it came in. This was the one with the spares, and it happened to be a Sunday afternoon, and the result was that the Cairnbog St Combs Road was just packed with people watching this aircraft. I'm sure there's thousands around this area who will remember that particular happening, because to see a Flying Fortress land at Cairnbog was something even in those days. But we did have these Warwick aircraft patrolling with lifeboats around this coast, which we hadn't seen before again, probably many local people saw them, but they had a lifeboat actually strapped underneath the nose of the aircraft. And we were eventually transferred to Bindy Aerodrome at Banff, which was the main station, and Dullachy further along the coast was also in a satellite. But having been transferred to Banff, the unit actually disbanded on the 30th of August in 1944. This particular unit, number 14 Advanced Flying Unit, was, I believe, one of the biggest units in the whole of Britain, and I can't give you a figure for the amount of pilots that were trained over the time we was here, but I do remember reading up that it was an unbelievable figure. The particular aircraft was an Airspeed Oxford, a twin-engine plane, which was used for training pilots at RAF Boch during 1943. And the men sitting on it are the maintenance crew of the night flying flight. In Boch, we was bulleted on the Nissen huts to the right of the road before you went up to Mains Brae, and the water just poured down that road from a farm, and the result was the Nissen huts were totally soaked in water and terrific damp, so they had to be scrapped, I think, at a fairly early convenience, and we was eventually on huts that were built over at Gowan Hill. Well, when we first arrived we had a terrible time of it, I would say, and when we came into Fraserburgh, some of them admitted seemed to speak as broad as others, but we did manage to decipher Fraserburgh, although there was lots of words that none of us knew anything about. But when we went down to the canteen at Boch, it was very, very hard to make yourself understood or to understand what was being said.